And everything's situated. Definitely won't have to record this a third time. Yo, what's up, boys and girls? SwoleTrain here. I'm back at it here with the video. So I'm just over today. Let's talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed dating. I mean, speed dueling. Dang it. Let's talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Dueling. No. Oh my god. Let's talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed dueling. Konami introduced speed dueling earlier this year while trying to transition the dueling style of play with the 3 monsters, 3 spells, and a limited card pool into a physical TCG. Their first set, as it were, was actually 2 structure decks released. I happen to pick up this one right here. It is a Kaiba, Joey, and my structure deck, the Speed Duel starter decks, Duelist of Tomorrow. There's also one containing a few other anime characters, Pegasus, Yugi, and then Merrick's sister. So I picked up the starter decks a few weeks ago when I heard they were coming out. Now, I did not get them on the day of release. In fact, it was a little while after that. I was a little bit late to the party, but I really wanted to figure out if I really wanted to invest my time and money into a format that I could already play on my phone. But I decided to say, whatever. Let's go ahead and pick it up. Let's go ahead and give it a shot. So I sat there and I texted some of my homies. I'm like, yo, what's up, guys? You wanna go play some Yu-Gi-Oh? They're like, get lost, nerd. Come on, guys, I swear I'm cool. I'm just joking. They said, yeah, sure, let's go ahead and play. We sat down and we played a lot of games with the My, Joey, and Kaiba structure decks. And to my surprise, I actually liked it. It was actually a lot of fun. You had me, who was someone that was more experienced in the TCG and regular Yu-Gi-Oh! One of my friends was someone that played a little bit of the TCG, but nothing too extensive, so we had prior knowledge of more advanced stuff. And then I had one of my friends who played Joey the Passion. If you know anything about that game, you know the exact extent of his skill. So we ripped open all 3 of these starter decks. We played a few games, rotating the decks, rotating the skills, and having a blast. And like I said, this was very surprising to me, as I initially came in with the fact that I was like, I'm not gonna like it. This is gonna make me want to play the regular TCG. But again, in all honesty, it was a pretty good time. Funny thing is, I went into it trying to find flaws and I wanted to gripe about it. And while I did find a lot of those, ultimately speed dueling was really enjoyable and it makes me look forward to seeing what they have in store for the future. But if you guys have read the title of this video, you guys have seen the thumbnail, and you guys know I'm going to talk about why I think speed dueling, aka speed duel links, or whatever I call it, messing up in this video, is going to fail. I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed dueling is doomed to fail unless Konami fixes some of these problems that are currently within the game. Some of these issues are more systematic problems with Konami and just the general handling of the TCG in general, at least on the American side. But let's go through point by point and see what issues need to be addressed for speed dueling in order to make it successful. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just talk about why I think speed dueling is doomed to fail, ... unless. So Arena of Lost Souls was actually just released, and that is the first speed dueling set, so to speak, for the speed dueling format. But now currently there are 2 packs, Arena of Lost Souls, and then another one coming like Mystic Depths or something like that. And though I think some of the reprints and some of the cards available inside of these sets are actually pretty cool, seeing some of the skills in Super and Ultra Rare is kind of nice. I actually don't think putting out sets is the correct way to expand upon the current card pool. It might sound really weird for me to say that, considering that it's Yu-Gi-Oh! Even in Duel Links, they just release sets and different cards, and then, oh, boom, you string together your deck from that. It's not always going to be a structure deck. It's not always going to be something that is currently pre-built. Well, we all know how that system works, how we all know how that system is sometimes flawed. I think in this scenario, it's actually more of a detriment to the overall game than a strength. But I think Konami hit the nail on the head whenever they did the sealed products with the structure decks. Structure decks are pretty cool because they contain 3 different decks, all containing 3 ready to go, tear it open, and have fun packs. And for just the amount of the regular structure decks, you can get 3 decks that you can all test out and play. That is actually a really cool and really interesting format of selling products that I think will benefit them in the long run. Now, of course, we are going to be continuing to get structure decks, but the fact that they're taking the same route as they have been with the Duel Links, with the TCG, I think will actually hurt them more than help them. A big reason for this is player interest. Why would I, as a player, want to go out and find speed dueling sets versus just buying the regular TCG? It seems kind of weird because speed dueling is more targeted to a casual, more older audience. And people that maybe remember the anime, people that just kind of want to get into Yu-Gi-Oh! And kind of give it a try, but not want to spend a lot of money. So it's more cost beneficial to the consumer to buy the structure decks and the starter decks instead of the single packs. It's not really the same with the TCG just because the card pool is so much bigger than speed dueling. Because speed dueling has such a limited card pool, once players figure out that they already have the best deck or the best cards from the starter decks, then there's also no need to go out and get the packs, get the Arena of Lost Souls, get the other one that's coming out later this year. So just releasing these starter and structure decks is a way for Konami to still push their product and still push the cards they want to get out, but it also won't waste players' time by making them chase after cards that they may not even use. Moving on to the next point, and I touched upon it a little bit in the first one. What I have in my notes here is anime-ness, in quotation marks. It's pretty clear that Konami is trying to market speed dueling to a casual, more anime-friendly market. Most of the packs and the structure decks come with anime characters placed on them, and the cards that you would see are ones that you would probably see in the anime or in old school Yu-Gi-Oh! And what I mean by the anime-ness of these decks, of these cards need to be fixed, more or less relates just to the structure decks, as that's probably the most experience that we've had with speed dueling so far. With just these sealed products, I think they either need to lean more or less into how anime they want to make each deck. And that's kind of a weird thing, because with the decks that I just showed you, with the Kaiba, the Joey, and the Mai structure decks, the Joey Wheeler structure deck is extremely anime. What I mean by that is that all the cards are relatively non-sequitur, they're pretty weak monsters, and even the fusion cards that he has are just kind of his bad fusion monsters. The skills of his are actually pretty cool, and we'll get to that in a second. But his cards are all like you would remember them. They have Graceful Dice, Skull Dice, the Polymerization card for Baby Dragon, and also the Time Wizard. It's almost what you think of whenever casuals think of old school Yu-Gi-Oh! And the fact that, you know, everyone's just kind of slapping cards together, and it's like the anime where they draw cards and you know, each of them have their own place inside the deck. That is what the Joey structure deck feels like. Even Red Eyes is in there, Meteor Dragon's in there, and they're completely useless. They're probably the worst cards inside of that structure deck. The Kaiba and the Mai ones resemble the Kaiba and Mai feel of the anime. Kaiba has a roughly dragon-based deck. Mai has a Harpy and an Amazonas deck, and while the Amazonas deck and the Harpy deck sometimes don't synergize too well together, at least it's somewhat in that middle ground where it's like, obviously it's anime inspired, but it's still cohesive enough to where it all fits. And that's why I don't necessarily get why Joey's is like this. I know in the anime that was kind of his thing. He was probably, outside of Tristan, the worst duelist, but his deck is supposed to center around fusions and fusion cards. Even one of his skills is called Palominization. Palominization, there we go. And allows him essentially to have a King of the Swamp style effect where he can substitute one normal monster card he reveals as a fusion material. This is actually pretty neat. However, he only has a select number of normal monsters inside of his deck, and the fusions he summons are actually pretty garbage. But with the Kaiba and Mai ones, like I said, they teeter on the anime side of it, but also in the cohesive synergy side of it. I feel like the moral and what I'm trying to say with this is that the Joey decks has a big disconnect between the Kaiba and Mai ones. The Kaiba and Mai ones are anime feeling, they have the same cards and things that you would recognize and associate with those characters, but they also have their own strategies and the own way they work. For example, I acknowledge that Joey has skills like Last Gamble and cards like Graceful Dice and Skull Dice to kind of echo and emulate the anime where he is more, you know, gamble and like flip a coin, dice roll-esque. Kaiba and Mai also have that in a sense, like beat down with Kaiba, he's more ruthless, more aggressive. Mai with the Roma strategy means she can look at the top card of her deck anytime, but you would never use those skills inside of those decks. Instead, you would use things like Dragon Collar, which is broken. You would use things like the Harpy and Trival Synergy, and there are things that are new enough and unique enough for the speed dueling format, but also you could definitely see those things being real in the anime somehow. Because I have Lord of D inside my hand, I can have Flute of Summoning Dragon. Oh no! Whereas Joey Wheeler's, the Palominization is probably the more interesting one, and definitely, well, Last Gamble is probably the best skill he has. And I've kind of gotten sidetracked here a little bit, but I think that for future sets and for future structure decks, they need to either lean into the anime and make it very character specific, make it very character dependent, make it so where it's like, okay, this is straight out of the anime and all decks are like that. Or they need to go to the Kaiba and Mai route and make it anime inspired, not so much that it's a detriment to the actual play style of the deck. Where it came to a point where I was thinking, why would I want to pick up the Joey deck or any of the Joey cards when I can just pick up the Kaiba cards and just win? That's kind of where you don't want your player. That actually leads me into a really good segue into balance. Balancing Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links and also balancing the TCG is kind of hard. There are definitely dominant decks inside the format and things that reign supreme. Right now inside of Duel Links, I believe Ancient Gears is the current best deck just because of the conditions and the ban list that is set up previously. You have some consistent ones that stay on top there, like our boy Heroes. Then you have certain times when you're in a tier 0 format where things like Fur Hire and Kwakimiru are just insane. Same with the TCG, so you have Spiral, you have Zodiac, and even prominent decks like Sky Strikers, Thunder Dragons, and also Salamangreats right now. It's natural that balance is unachievable with something like Yu-Gi-Oh! Just because we have thousands and thousands of cards that can tip the scale in one direction or the other. But I feel like with such a limited card pool, Konami can make it really easy to balance things like speed duel. Like I was just saying with the Joey, Kaiba, and Mai structure deck, the Kaiba deck is so dominant. While as the Mai one can sometimes win and has some outs to the Kaiba decks, the Joey one almost stands no chance unless you get extremely lucky. With such a limited card pool, they could have made a rock, paper, scissors dynamic to each of the decks, whereas one deck pretty much beats the other deck, one deck pretty much beats the other deck, and so on and so forth. Or they could have made it to where they're all relatively the same power level. Having controlled release as they will enables them to test out smaller pools of cards and smaller possibilities and different combinations of combos of decks. This makes it extremely easy to balance. Right now, a big issue with the game is that it is way too much like Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. Duel Links has a really big going first problem. Same thing with speed dueling. If you go first, unless you have a setup to where you can stop your opponent from attacking, most of the time, they're probably going to have the upper hand and probably will win. Going second, you can OTK because the life points are so low. This opens up to a lot more shenanigans. Having the extra card drawn going second is surprisingly big. Similar to Mass Hero OTK, similar to Ancient Gears, and similar to Kawaki Miro, going second instead of Duel Links, if you draw into your mass change, if you get your big guy on board, you're probably winning that one because the life points are so low. So if Konami can make a way to where going first and going second is equally beneficial to the player, of course depending on which deck it is, then I believe that'll solve certain issues with the balance outside of just the general card pool and power scaling. If they can address power scaling and going first and second, that'd be beautiful, but I'll take one or the other. The next thing I want to highlight inside of Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed Dueling is communication. It's pretty sporadic, and sometimes I think they just kind of like forget, or like someone's not staffed to be like a community relations person. That's a bigger systematic issue. But I think that speed dueling in particular needs to have more communication to its player base. Surprisingly enough, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links does have a pretty good communication line to its players, inside of every single Forbidden Limited list and even skill change update. And though it is pretty obvious to some of the players that have been playing ranked, it is kind of nice to see when they say, oh, we just changed this card because it's been super dominant inside the meta. We think it's unfair, essentially. We changed the skill beatdown because we recognized that it was getting abused by decks that maybe weren't supposed to be used in the right way. Same thing with things like Trick Up the Sleeve, where now it only adds Dark Magician instead of Blue Eyes. And so I want that same thing for speed dueling. I want it for the TCG too, but I also want it for speed dueling because if you guys do remember, we had the first ever YCS that was featuring a speed dueling event. And literally days, if not minutes before, they didn't tell their players whether it's going to be structured or sealed. So players were out there wondering, they were getting the structured decks, they were making their decks and trying to theorize, okay, if it's sealed, I'm gonna play this. If it's not sealed and it's structured, I'm gonna play this. And that kind of uncertainty, that kind of back and forth was hilarious, first and foremost. But also it was really weird because Konami could have just put an update on their website, an FAQ somewhere. But when you can't even tell your player base how your game is going to be played, then that's a problem. Konami needs a point person for Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed Dueling and the speed dueling community. They also need this for the TCG, as they do with Duel Links. Or at least they need to take the same Duel Links philosophy and transfer that into the physical card games. My last point, but also my last question concerning Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links speed dueling is, why would I want to play speed dueling? Why would I want to play speed dueling over something like past formats? Why would I want to play it over something like GOAT? Why would I want to play speed dueling over something like Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links? There are a few obvious surface level answers here, like, oh, well, Duel Links is way too complicated now. It's gone too far. Or, oh no, the TCG is way too complicated, man. Or, no, GOAT format's overrated. Besides, it's just so much the same thing. Man. But I'm being serious here. What is the benefit of playing something like speed dueling over Duel Links or even past formats where the card game might be a little bit slower than Master Rule 4? Finding a hard time finding out why I would want to play something like speed dueling when I could just play older format Yu-Gi-Oh! I could play GOAT, I could play Yu-Gi Kaiba format, or even then I could play Duel Links, which is essentially just the same thing, but I can play it on my phone, on the go. I don't have to worry about physical cards, I don't have to worry about going out and getting the packs. And that's something that I think Konami needs to answer, whether it be directly or indirectly. For example, I can see why people want to play Duel Links over the TCG. There are enough things different about it, and obviously Duel Links is digital, so where people can separate the two games and they have their own fan bases, they have their own players. Certain people prefer one or the other, and some people play both. But speed dueling is inside this weird limbo, where it's not quite Duel Links, but it's also not quite the TCG. And I think that's not necessarily an issue yet. But like I said in the very beginning of this video, I actually had a pretty enjoyable time, and I was surprised by how much I did enjoy speed dueling. It was a nice blast from the past to see some old school cards and some old school strategies, and also someone that was very familiar with Duel Links. I had a good time transitioning those skills into this game. It also helped that the friends that I was playing with was also pretty fun. This is one time we used, for Joey's skill, we used a D20 for last gamble, so you know, if you rolled a higher number, you just draw a ridiculous amount of cards, but it's also because the Joey deck sucks. But like I said, I really enjoyed Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. Speed dueling. Like I said, I really enjoyed Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed dueling. Obviously, I have some issues with the game, and I think they need to address that later down the road, not only inside the game itself, but also outside of it. But as of now, I think that it's a pretty good time, and if you were just kind of looking for something to do, or if you're an old school player or a new player trying to get back into maybe the card game, or just kind of want to have a good Yu-Gi-Oh! Experience that's not Duel Links and not the TCG, then maybe give it a shot. I'm not quite sure. Duel at your own discretion. But that's all I gotta say about it. What do you guys think of it? What do you guys think of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links? What do you guys think of speed dueling? What do you guys think of the TCG? Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you guys like it? Do you guys hate it? Have you guys tried speed dueling? And if so, what do you think they could improve on, or what do you think they can, what do you think they're doing right? I don't know what they improve on, what do you think they're doing right. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. You guys have heard my thoughts, and now I pass the questions on to you. If you guys like the video, make sure to leave a like. If you want some more, please subscribe. More videos coming to the pipeline, so stay tuned to that if you want to. But yeah, that's all I gotta say. Peace out.